My first game, an Elder Scrolls game, but like my version. I always feel like Bethesda thinks that like they've lost touch with like what made their games so popular. I think a lot of people forget that like when Skyrim came out in 2011 and then like when Oblivion came out in 2006, they were like technical marvels, and they had made huge ground in like procedural generation. They were one of the few companies in the world that was simulating actual worlds, like all of the characters in Oblivion had like a schedule. Same thing with Skyrim. In Skyrim, you could see like NPCs out in the wild and stuff, like on vacation and stuff. Oblivion had this whole system where like the goblins would like fight each other, and I mean that kind of stuff is what I think their core competency was. But I think it's clear to me now, having seen Starfield, I think they think that their core competency is like style. I think that if I were to make an Elder Scrolls game in the current day, I don't know where I would set it. Ultimately, I honestly don't think it matters. I think that the fact that the new one's in Hammerfell is really cool. But what I would focus on is stuff that's like technically difficult and something that stuff that other people are not doing. I would market it as crowd tech, and then instead of it just being like, you know, like current like cutting edge crowd tech is stuff that's like cyberpunk, where like they spawn in ahead of you as you're walking down the street or whatever, so it looks like the city's just full of people. Or like Ubisoft does something similar to that. There's like that kind of crowd tech, and then there's like the Red Dead Redemption Rockstar style crowd tech, where you have like, you know, pre-canned things, and that stuff's cool. My version would be a huge overhaul and really hitting a middle ground between those two kinds of systems. Like, for example, I think it would be really cool if, in addition to all the NPCs in a town having their own schedule, all of their conversations were generated like dynamically. What you do is you just generate like 1,000 voice lines, and then you have like really good machine learning voices for all of these people. Like, for example, the finals was 2 voice actors that actually existed, and then they recorded them saying like a ton of stuff, and then they made models for each of them that they can use now into perpetuity. Which, I mean, I don't want to get in the ethics of all that, but like that kind of technology where you're just taking something and then you're making it dynamic like that, I mean, the implications of that kind of stuff are huge to me. So the idea that you could like take an LLM, feed it a ton of scenarios or whatever, of things that might happen in your game, and just have it come up with 100 different things it could say for each thing. You could save that somewhere, and then have your second model that does audio take that and turn it into like voice for that person. Another thing I'd do differently is I really hate how in 2024 we still have lots of games where the characters are modeled. I get it for like lower budget games, they still have to like, you know, maybe you're working with like asset packs, or maybe you don't have like a ton of maybe you're doing something like cartoony. Like, it makes complete sense to me that you would model that kind of stuff by hand, right? But if you're doing a photorealistic game and you're in the AAA space, I feel like you need to have every character be a real person that gets scanned into your video game. I feel like that is like I feel like it's so black and white for me right now, of Call of Duty style games where the characters are obviously scanned, like, you know, Horizon Zero Dawn, stuff like that, where it's like obviously the characters are photo scanned into the game, and then stuff that's not. Starfield, they definitely did photo scan those people in. I think making use of like photogrammetry for character models is like especially critical if you're going to be making a AAA game, because the results are just so different. On that topic, one of the things that Bethesda still does really well is like the idea that you're going to procedurally generate like a bunch of terrain, and then you're going to put points of interest on that terrain or whatever. Like say what you want about Starfield, but like the fact that all of that is procedurally generated was like pretty crazy. Like the planet surface kind of looks like crap, but like generating like, oh, and then there will be a base, and then there will be people in the base, and the base will have, you know, objects all over the place, like, writings on the whiteboard and stuff like that, and all sorts of stuff like that. That's pretty crazy. That's kind of a really, there's stuff out there like No Man's Sky and stuff that just takes procedural generation even further, but I would definitely cut that down a lot more in terms of scope, though. I think the way they did it for Oblivion and Skyrim made complete sense to me. You procedurally generate the land, you have your artists and your world designers go in there, and then they put handcrafted locations in all of the different spots. And then I also think for the next Elder Scrolls game, having tons of art around the weapons that you hold and everything would also be super useful. I actually don't mind the fact that in Skyrim you had there was iron swords, and then you move up to steel swords, and then you move up to dwarven, and then there's orcish, and then all the way up to Daedra, and Daedra was just the best, and they had the best stats, and then there were enchantments, you could put all those different items to make them slightly different. I actually don't mind that kind of a system. I just feel if you're going to be making AAA games in 2024, you should just say, how many weapons do we want to have? And I would probably come up with a number you need 200 weapons. And then each one of those, once you have nailed down a number of we're only going to do 200, make them good. Make 200 good weapons. I think that sounds like a lot to me in the onset, but I feel if you had a ton of people dedicated to modeling and to, art design and stuff like that, I don't think it would actually be that crazy to go and do 200 swords or something. And I don't think it would be 200 swords. It'd be 50 swords and 50 bows, and then smaller. You don't need so many warhammers because nobody plays with the warhammers, and you don't need so many staffs and stuff like that. I just feel they should make unique art pieces, and you would still have tons of iron swords laying around. I'm just saying that at the end of a quest, usually there should be some sort of a unique thing in there. And make them good, make them cool. It's so cool to me that in Lord of the Rings, all of the swords have names. So the next game I would make, and context here, this is the day after the Arc Raiders gameplay was revealed. And so I have some thoughts about that, which is kind of influencing this next part. But my next game I would make with $300 million is Arc Raiders, but the version that they teased in the very first trailer they ever did. And I think because that trailer is so vague, I can kind of paint my own impression of what I thought that game was going to be, even if that's not what they were actually going to make in the first place anyway. Maybe they did pivot for a good reason because it did suck, or it wasn't playtesting well, or something like that, right? But my version of this game would have the giant robots in it, right? And the cool technology they were showing on their blog, where they're teaching the spiders how to walk with machine learning and stuff. That is so cool. And that really, I can think of so many good game ideas that revolve around that. You remember in Star Wars when the AT-ATs are marching or whatever, and then they have to circle them up with the ropes, whatever, and then the AT-AT falls out. And I think that kind of stuff is cool. I can think of so you could use you could have a bunch of players with vehicles trying to cable down these things or whatever, and then because they are not animations, because their legs actually move and have physics, you could have these players trying to literally pull this thing apart, and I would make the joints where that you could separate on the legs and stuff like that. And so I imagine that initially most players would just try to blow these things up, and so basically you'd have a giant robot walking around lasering the ground or something as its leg is blown off or whatever, and then you could have players climbing up all over these things. And then in my head it should be kind of how in Halo, those giant robots that would walk around, I think they were called scarabs, but you basically had to scale the robot, and then inside there were more enemies for you to fight. I think that is that's how I would do it. In the AT-ATs, there was stormtroopers up there that you would have to go fight. So I think that it should be fighting the robot is only part of the battle. There's people manning this thing or something, and I guess in Arc Raiders lore it'd be other robots are manning this thing. But yeah, there's droids in this giant droid. They're trying to shoot you as people are scaling it and stuff, as other players are scaling it. And Embark with their dice level destruction is if you play the finals, you can see how good they are at networking destruction. I can just see how good this game would be if you had giant robots, and the whole thing is that you were like monster hunting these things, and there's some giant reward for taking these things down. And then I could see the content pipeline for this thing being that, like, you know, every month Embark is like making a new monster, and they like, you know, fill the pipeline up with, like, you know, next month it'll be this monster, next month it'll be this monster, whatever. And then as they add more and more to it, they can add areas for these giant robots to like exist and stuff. And then, like, there could be this whole loot progression thing where you're like, you know, you're slowly getting better weapons or whatever. And like, I'm so focused right now on the giant monsters, but I would definitely have, like, there would definitely be like smaller enemies running around the map or whatever, and like other hazards for you to avoid, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Like I could see players like trying to pull them towards something, like pull them off a cliff or something, or, you know, into a canyon or whatever. And the spider would just have to like try to learn how to deal with that or whatever. Last game on the list, I would make Prey 2, but the canceled version, the one that they didn't make. When I watched this trailer for the first time, I got so excited, and I was thinking, like, you know, like, I was in my head doing the same thing I just did with Arc Raiders, painting onto it all this stuff I thought there was. And there was this one scene where, like, he walks into this cantina or whatever, and then the boss that he's there to, like, you know, bounty hunt or whatever, like, turns around and, like, notices he's there, and then everyone in the cantina kind of freezes, and then he takes off, right? If that visual fidelity, which I think we could achieve in 2024, I do not think we could have achieved it in, like, 2012 or 2014 or whenever that trailer dropped. But, like, Unreal Engine 5 could easily do what was showed in that trailer, or something very close to it. And I have to be careful, because every time I think about this, I start just describing Hitman. But, like, I feel like there would be, like, a Witcher style thing where you'd get a target, and instead of your, you know, mode of operation being just like target assigned, drive over to them in my spy car or whatever, get out, find target, and then shoot everybody inside and then leave. I think that should be viable. So I think you should be able to do that. But I think that, like, as a game designer, you should make that the absolute hardest thing to do. Like, if you just go in there and you think you're just going to kill this guy, then you're going to shoot everybody inside, I think it should be insanely... That should be, like, the high skill ceiling players that get to do that. Everybody else should have to, like, do this whole preparatory phase or whatever. Like, I feel like every time I'm playing Hitman, I'm not really playing the game from a spy's perspective. I'm just, like, trying to avoid the line of sight on everybody until I get close enough to the person I'm trying to kill, and then I kill the person. I have to figure out a way to where that does not become the game. Like, I think the whole tracking part of bounty hunting is one of the coolest parts of bounty hunting. Like, the whole, I'm on the trail, I'm on the scent, I know where I'm going to find this guy kind of a thing. And then, like, the actual part where you catch them is not most of the game. Like, I think most of the game should be, like, gathering intelligence, chasing leads, that sort of stuff. I think that kind of stuff's really cool. And then another part that would really sell this game is that, like, the plot on that kind of stuff really matters. Like, I feel like that would be a good chance to do, like, cinematics. I feel like cinematics are not something that I'm super into as a gamer. Like, I just feel like games are meant to be played, and so every time you put a video inside of my video game, it's just like, all right, I guess I'll watch this so I know what's going on. But, like, I almost always feel like it breaks up the action or whatever. But because this would be about information and chasing leads, I feel like it's the right kind of way to do it. And actually, I wouldn't do cinematics. I would do it like how Rockstar does the in-engine cutscenes. And then if, like, that scene I was talking about earlier in the bar, like, if that was like an in-engine thing, like the camera comes into that perspective or whatever, you see that go down, and then the camera pulls back to the player controller camera, that would be, like, almost perfect, I think. This is another thing that I think I could do more with, like, crowd tech. So, like, kind of like piggybacking off of my, like, Elder Scrolls idea, what you should do as a game designer is, if you're gonna implement this, it would be like, we're just gonna make it so that there are no, like, innocent civilians around ever, kind of a thing. Like, every person in the entire game can die, and that you have the contingency plan in place of, like, if this NPC dies, what does that affect, and then can somebody come in and, like, cover this or whatever. Like, in Skyrim, you could not kill General Tullius, and so, like, because if you did, the game would have to like account for that and like be like, okay, well now we're gonna bring in the new General Tullius or something, and then how does that affect the war? And then all the other characters have to know not to call him General Tullius anymore, and all the quests related to him would have to not break. I think that right now we are in a perfect position to do a lot of that stuff. I think that if you had a robot that was with the character, they could call attention to the systems that are happening in the game, so that the player like there was this one case study I remember where a lot of people didn't think that the Halo NPCs were very smart, and then Bungie intentionally put voice lines in the game of them calling attention to stuff, like being like, oh, he's gonna throw a grenade, you know what I mean, stuff like that. That made them all think that the NPCs were smarter, even though the behavior had not changed. It was just the game like outright acknowledging stuff that was happening. I think, or the systems were triggering kind of a thing, like the game was doing what it's supposed to do. Like that would be necessary here. Like if you had this second robot companion that was helping you through the mysteries and stuff, you're like trying to solve a murder or something in this game, or if you're trying to like trace a drug, like there. Also, Hitman is all about like it's always just about like doing Hitman stuff. Like you're always trying to kill somebody. Like it would be so cool if your only job was to track a shipment. Like figure out where this came from. And it's like I just think that there are so many cool things you can do in a game like this. That basically wraps up what I was trying to say about this video. Let me know what you think. What would you do with $300 million? I actually think the figure's higher. I looked it up, it was closer to $400 million, but I don't know. You see so many estimates on the internet of like, oh, Concord cost this much, Concord cost that much, and I don't know. It's probably somewhere in the middle. So I'm going with $300 million, but let me know what you would make with $300 million. I mean, that's a lot of money. I feel like you could pay, like, even if you're like in your head, you're like thinking that like, oh, well, you got to pay so many salaries for like 3, 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. And then, you're probably going to fly people to locations so they can scan stuff. And then, you're going to pay actors and voice actors, and you're going to have like, games are expensive. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand how we can get like to places like that, but like hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, I feel like you could do with less. I don't know. But yeah, that's me. I'm signing out. Peace.